Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome. It's great to be here. Great to be here with some really successful deployments of Microsoft Teams. Jazz from the city of Kelowna and Ron from Flair, but also joined by Microsoft as well. So we have a couple of people from Microsoft with us today, Lorena and Mike Patterson. And I wanted to start out with Microsoft and sort of set the stage a little. If anyone was expecting a lot of slideware today, nope, it's just going to be faces and chatting, I'm afraid. We do have a few slides if we need to explain anything on questions, but really, I'd like this to be more of a fireside chat, talk about success stories, and interactive as well. So if anyone has any questions and you want to chime in, feel free. Maybe after we finished with the overview of the city of Kelowna and Flair, and we can get into a questions session there. But to kick it off, I wanted to talk to Microsoft about Teams Phone Mobile, Operator Connect, and general sort of cloud telephony space. And just sort of get a finger on the pulse of what's going down and what we can expect in the future from this 5-year partnership. So over to first question, I think is going to Mike here. Mike, Teams has been incredibly successful for Microsoft in the last 5 years. Where do you see Teams development focusing in the next 5 years?
Thanks for that, Simon. And to the folks on the bridge, I apologize in advance. I'm actually in a pretty noisy airport right now. Let me know if the Teams noise reduction is working. Are you guys? Can you guys hear me? Okay.
We can't hear a thing. Just you.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. Okay, so I'll just start by introducing myself before I answer the question, Simon, if that's okay.
Yeah,
I know I believe a bio was shared. I'm actually in Winnipeg today. I just finished with the Rogers team here locally. We were presenting to Merlin, which is a collective in Manitoba that represents the school boards and does a lot of the IT related purchasing for the various school boards in Manitoba. And we were talking about Teams and Teams Phone and the various options from Rogers around enabling Teams Phone. So I'm at the airport. I'm going to be flying out in about an hour, or an hour and a half or so, but I'm really glad to be on this call. Thanks for the invite. Mike Patterson, that's my name. I work for Microsoft. I'm based usually in Toronto, but I'm happy to travel wherever Rogers requests me to go. So I think this is my second time in Winnipeg in the past number of months. I'm our telecom industry advisor for Canada. And what that really means, because it's a long title, is I work with our telecom partners in Canada around, as Simon had mentioned, what are the cool things that we can do together today and what are the cool things we can do together in the future. I look at what's happening with our telecom partners globally, whether it's Verizon and AT&T in the US or Deutsche and BT out in Europe, and say, oh, we're doing really cool stuff there. How can we map it into our partners here in Canada? And primarily, I would say, really first with Rogers, because we have a strategic partnership in place with Rogers. Okay, so with that said, I will answer Simon's question. So I'll get back to Simon's original question, which is where we think we're going with Teams. And it's a good question. I would say it should come as no surprise to anyone on this call if they've been following the news over the past 6 months. There's been a lot of focus in the industry around AI technology. So I'm sure many of you saw that back in January of this year, Microsoft announced that they were doubling down, actually more than doubling down, doing a 10 times increase in our investment in OpenAI. So many of you have probably played with ChatGPT back at the end of last year. I know myself and most of the folks I know started playing with it in the December timeframe, got really hooked on doing cool things with it, and now it's become part of our daily life. Satya, who is our CEO, and the executive team made a conscious decision to really double down on that investment in in OpenAI, and a big focus of what Microsoft is doing now and over the next 5 years will be how we integrate that generational language AI into our products. So you've likely seen announcements around M365 Copilot, GitHub Copilot, Azure OpenAI services, really about taking what we call the scaffolding or the drudgery of the work you do every day, and using AI to address that functionality or those tasks, so you can focus on higher level tasks. Sorry, Simon.
I was just going to say, could you see a world where the annotation feature that you have in Teams today, that the AI would summarize that and give people action items and tasks, kind of like minutes would be done?
You're stealing my thunder, Simon.
Sorry.
I was just about to go there.
Go ahead.
So one of the things we've announced from a Teams perspective is a function or a service we call Teams Recap. So this is where we are going with AI integration into the likes of Teams. So just in a brief synopsis of how it works. Today, when you get invited to a Teams meeting, you have two choices. Those choices are accept the meeting. Actually, three choices: accept, decline, or tentative. Right? Maybe you'll show up, maybe you won't. In the future, you'll have another button that's called follow. If you click on the follow button, what will happen is you don't go to the meeting, but when it's done in your Teams activity, in your Teams client, you will have the meeting recap will appear. You can click on that, and it will provide you a summary of the meeting, all the actions that happen within the meeting, all the takeaways from the meeting, who said what. But even cooler, you can do things like, as an example, maybe a decision was made in the meeting to go with vendor A versus vendor B for a certain project. You can query it, like in the chat function, why was that decision made? And it will take the transcripts of the meeting and give you the summary as, okay, well, this decision was made because of X, Y, and Z. So it's not just annotation, but it's actually analysis of the data, where you can ask natural language questions and get answers back based on the AI function reviewing that data. So that's an example of AI that we are integrating into Teams as part of our Copilot program. The other area, Simon, that I'll say that we're focusing on from where Teams is going is deeper integration with our other cloud offerings. So today, Teams resides within M365. As folks on this call are likely aware, we also have Dynamics, which is our CRM platform and business applications platform, in Azure, which is more of our cloud IaaS and platform as a service offering. So where I see things going is Teams will have deeper and deeper integration into things like Dynamics to provide more of a, we're calling it DCCP, or Digital Contact Center platform solution, where we'll tie in the Teams functionality into our CRM offering for omni-channel type services and virtual agent type services. So yeah, I guess in summary that there's a lot going on there, and I don't want to take up all the time on just one question, but it's a really good question, and I'm super excited about the stuff we're going to be bringing to market with partners like Rogers.
Awesome. Thank you for the summary there. I'm going to skip to question 3 here, which is, as part of the partnership, there is a high level of physical network connectivity between Rogers and Microsoft to ensure things go well. Can you give a quick summary of what you require from carriers to make sure that you get the best quality voice calls pretty much day in, day out?
Yeah, sure. I Lorena, you cool if I take that one? Okay, cool. So the way that Teams phone service is delivered today, there's multiple flavors in which it can be delivered, right? So there's the, and I won't talk about calling plans, which is really the Microsoft first party option, which frankly is kind of best effort, lowest quality, highest cost, to be completely honest. It was our first market entry before we had partnerships with the telcos. And I'm not going to talk about Teams Phone Mobile. That's completely a whole other thing that we've launched with Rogers here in Canada. Actually, they were the first to launch globally. So that's exciting. But to answer your question, Simon, when we talk about connectivity between the telcos and Microsoft from a quality of service or cost perspective, we're really talking about two ways of delivering PSTN connectivity into Teams Phone. One is direct routing, which is kind of where we started after Teams calling plans, and one is Operator Connect. The difference between the two is for direct routing, again, we're talking best effort, the traffic passes over the internet, versus Operator Connect, where we have what we call Maps or Microsoft, is it Access Peering Service? Azure
Yes.
Peering Service, thank you.
Azure Peering Service.
Microsoft, we throw out a lot of acronyms. It's hard to remember them all. So for a provider to qualify for being able to offer the Operator Connect service, they have to sign up for Maps. And the reason we do that is we expect those service providers to offer a quality of service that can be measured and can be tweaked, right? It's not best effort over the internet. We have direct, in the case of Rogers, 40 gig peering connections between the Rogers points of presence directly into our Teams data centers, right? So and it's not just 40 gig circuits, but it's redundant 40 gig circuits, right? So if there's a problem, there's a failover there as well. By doing so, we together can guarantee a much higher availability and guarantee those SLAs as well.
Wherever we possibly can, we avoid the internet. So whenever you are using a Microsoft product on a Rogers connectivity, we will recognize that packet space, that network, and we'll put it across the private network rather than going over the bumpy public internet. And it tends to work. It tends to give us a much better quality of service in general. Might need to go a little faster, but we'll see. Teams Phone Mobile is an international strategy for Microsoft, obviously. Do you know how many countries now have Teams Phone Mobile into them? Or I know it's expanding every week or so.
Well, I wouldn't say it's expanding every week. And the reason I say that is because it takes a lot of investment from an engineering perspective, both within Microsoft as well as with the telcos, and not just actually engineering resources, but funding, right, to build out the integration between our networks to actually support Teams Phone Mobile. So we launched initially, like I had mentioned earlier, with Rogers as our first Teams Phone Mobile launch partner globally. Since then, we have added Verizon, British Telecom, Telia, Deutsche Telekom, and I believe Vodafone. I think we're up to like 5 or 6 now. One thing that we don't have today is a launch partner or a telco partner offering the service in Asia. So given the limited resources we have in terms of launching this service with incremental or new partners, it is my expectation that Microsoft Teams Phone Mobile product team will focus on territories where we don't have service today, such as Asia, before we start adding more providers in areas where we already have service. I hope that answers your question, Simon.
It does. Going to skip to the last question here just because of time. Does Microsoft have any programs available to help customers plan larger legacy voice to Teams migrations? So a bit of a layup here, but I think you guys do have some help that you can offer some of these organizations.
So I'll hand this one over to my colleague Lorena to address.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And hi, everyone. So good to meet you. My name's Lorena. I'm the Partner Development Manager here at Microsoft for the Rogers strategic alliance. So you may or may not know, last March, Rogers and Microsoft entered into a 5-year strategic alliance. And obviously, the first really big splashy piece of news after that was the launch of Teams Phone Mobile, with Rogers being the only Canadian operator of Teams Phone Mobile. And was actually the first in the world to bring it into market. So pretty resounding feat. I would say, looking at, when customers are making those big migrations from on-prem into the cloud, especially from a telephony perspective. And I think we have some really good examples with City of Kelowna and with Flair. And I know many other Rogers customers who have started this transition. Rogers has a really strong bench of both in-house and also partner relationships and resources that they can look to leverage for those, for looking at that mapping of making that migration journey. So absolutely would encourage you, and Simon, putting you back on the spot, reach out to Simon if there is an interest to say, hey, we are on-prem today, but we've invested in Teams. And so we're now looking to make that natural extension of how do we bring inbound and outbound calling right into Teams for our end users. What could that look like? Could you help us map that out? Could you kind of hold our hand down that process? And Rogers and their extended network is absolutely in an incredible place to help you make that transition.
Thank you, Lorena. And actually, that's a perfect segue. I didn't plan that at all. Thank you, Microsoft, for the kind words today and for the information there. At this point, I'm going to introduce Jazz from the City of Kelowna. If you were at the MISA event last year, you remember Jazz and I spoke about their deployment. Jazz, how are you doing?
Doing well. Simon, how are you?
Good to see you again. Got a few prepared questions here for you. Hope you're ready. Since last we spoke at MISA, how have things been going with your voice-enabled instance of Teams? How's everything been ticking along?
Yeah, it's gone really well. I would say the majority of our users, if not close to all of them, are moved over to Teams calling. We didn't really have any hiccups. It was a pretty smooth transition for us. We started before Operator Connect actually existed, and as soon as Operator Connect became live with Rogers, we quickly shifted over to that solution last year.
You were direct routing previously, and you managed to get into Operator Connect?
Yeah, and it was through Rogers we were doing some of that direct routing as well.
Oh, okay,
and so
cool.
It was a Rogers to then upgraded when the Operator Connect came. It's gone well. There's with municipalities, you have multiple lines of business, and so there's a few use cases we're just trying to sort out where you don't necessarily need a computer, but you need a phone. And so a few of those things we got to sort out, but for the most part, it's gone quite well.
Yeah. Are you talking about people that have sort of that basic need? They just need to dial tone and be able to bash some keys to make a phone call. And how do you get that out of the Teams experience? Is that?
Yeah, and to be honest, that was our lowest priority when we started to shift first, because we wanted to do a massive network upgrade and to get away from PoE phones and get towards Teams calling. There's a massive savings there as well, and for people to kind of work wherever they want to work, that's a key as well. And then obviously all the tools that were mentioned earlier about the integration with AI and workflow, and we're heavily invested in things like the Power Platform in Azure, and to bring people's work into Teams, and just calling is another thing, and records management with SharePoint's another thing. To have that central hub where you can do your everyday is quite phenomenal.
It sounds like, Jazz, that you started at the complex stuff and all the fun stuff, got all that done, and then you looked back down and went, oh, now I've got to do some of these dull tone handsets, and you're sort of figuring that out at the bottom end of the stack.
Call center as well, right? Just
how
do we handle that? And we're doing a much different approach than your traditional call center, and so I think this allows for that flexibility.
Yeah. Teams does have a nice API to be able to do a lot of cloud plugin and call centers. So good stuff. So one of the things, do you find people are using their mobile device more now to join their Teams meetings, even with video or voice? Is it becoming more natural for that? Everyone before would always go on their phone on the desk, put it on speakerphone or other stuff. Are they starting to modernize and take calls in cafes and stuff? I know I've seen you do it.
Yeah, I do it all the time. It's quite convenient when you can just go from your Teams CarPlay and then you walk to your office, and then you switch over to Teams, and no one notices that you've actually just went from your vehicle, you walked up the stairs, walked in your office, and you've done the whole transition. And it's been really great to have that experience. We've right off the gate, we averaged about 1.2 1.3 million minutes of audio and meeting within every 60 days is what we're averaging. And so we quickly transitioned over to that, and from our traditional phone line. And honestly, we saw, I think, less emails are being sent. Different types of meetings are happening now that maybe weren't happening before. We Teams enabled all our boardrooms as well right away. Just realized how important that was to have a seamless experience, and having the calling was just kind of a no-brainer. And then we are also on queue for Operator Connect Mobile as well.
Nice.
And so individuals that have two lines, you don't need two lines. You can just have one line and just sort of freely work. And so we're quite excited to see what that brings for us.
Very cool. One of the things I just picked up on there is that it is, or Teams, the convenience factor of it, the fact that you got the presence information and stuff there, it does get rid of that backwards and forwards email. Like, I used to get that all the time, where you bash in a question and then they would answer, and it's backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. And now it's just, you're like, you're green, just call me and get it done, right? Like, you don't see as much, well, hopefully you don't see as much of that backwards and forwards email going, where you got like 16 replies going on.
Well, it's not even the calling. We're a texting culture now, right? So just drop a message into someone's IM and let them respond when they have time to respond. Is beneficial as well.
Awesome. Has the scope of the projects expanded? If so, what are you looking to implement in the future? I think you just mentioned you're looking at Teams Phone Mobile, which is very cool.
Teams Phone Mobile, and we were thinking, like, what do we do with our call center solution? But we were one of the first organizations in Canada to be given access to the OpenAI models in January.
Oh, nice.
And we've implemented, we've taken AI voice, and we're looking at the Azure IVR as well going forward, and other solutions. So our chatbot's actually answering 6 of our incoming phone lines for our staff as well, and just using AI voice to have that conversation. And then when those customers and when those members of public are actually interacting with AI voice and they want to talk to an agent, it actually pumps it right over to their Teams line.
So you under NDA on that, or can I ask you how it's going?
Oh, it's going great. Yeah. I mean, we, like I said, our landfill, property tax, a few other areas are all answered by AI voice.
And how is it out of the box? Do you need it to train up a bit before it can get quite intelligent, or is it pretty good out of the box?
No, we like right out of the box, it's not bad, but we have a whole team that's just focused on that digital interaction through online and voice as well. And so it's gone quite well. We're about to go live with something large again, and we're working directly with Microsoft and some of the global black belts out of our Redmond to help us with some of that AI stuff. And we're really excited to see what the AI voice with the new potential Azure IVR.
And is it based on ChatGPT 4, the one you're testing?
You don't even need ChatGPT 4 to answer some of the basic questions.
Yeah, okay. So
3.5 does most of it. But the chatbot's smart enough to actually give you a confidence score and then reference the right model when to answer the question. And so we're at that deep now. So it's quite exciting.
When I first got a chance to play around with version 4, it just blew my mind. I was just thinking I was talking to a human. I don't know. I got somebody locked in a box somewhere. Very cool stuff. Have you or any of your users tried Operator Connect Mobile? We've already answered this question. How is it going? Have you started yet, or is that...
We're on queue, and we're working with Rogers right now on maybe testing a few things out here right away. And so as soon as we're ready with Rogers I think we're actually waiting on Rogers to be honest. And so as soon as we're ready, we're going to move forward.
And can I ask what sort of profile user you've categorized as, like, this person would be the best benefit for that type of
well, the service? Jazzes of the world. Like, I've got a company cell phone, I've got Teams as well, and I'm mobile, and any of the field workers that are out there that are in and out of the office every day, they're a great candidate as well. And anybody that doesn't want to have 2 phone lines, that it's got a corporate phone, just give them that option right away to say, do you actually use this secondary line now, especially with Teams calling and Teams meeting? And if the answer is no, just make sure that you're not being bombarded with calls that may have come to your line. And what does that sort of look like once you figure out a solution around that?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're quite excited.
I think there's one other side effect that's actually quite nice that I've noticed because I'm on Teams Phone Mobile. Because you go from 2 numbers to 1, you get half the spam calls.
Yeah.
Bonus.
Yeah.
Side effect. Jazz, thank you so much for coming in today and answering our questions. It sounds like things are going really well for you. Hopefully the Teams Phone Mobile expansion goes well, and very forward thinking on getting the AI stuff in there and working with Microsoft. I hear you've been down to Redmond and having a chat with them down there. So it sounds like you're a very forward thinking organization out there in Kelowna.
Yeah, we're definitely trying.
Thanks very much for coming in today. Thank you. And Ron, you've been sitting there quite patiently. Ron is from Flair Airlines. Thank you for joining us today. Got a few questions for you. Do you want to just do a quick introduction of yourself? And
Sure. My name's Ron Can. I'm the Senior Manager of IT for Flair Airlines. We've recently gotten into the Teams for the telephony for Teams, take your choice of your vernacular. And I'll get lots of questions from Simon about it here very shortly, I'm sure.
No worries. First of all, just can you describe your overall experience in procuring Microsoft services from Rogers? This is a very poignant question that wasn't written for me, promise, about how you felt the interaction was and who you interacted with at Rogers.
Yeah, sure. So right off the bat, Tyler was our point man on this project. Dennis is our salesman. But Tyler, right off the bat, came in and audited all of our Microsoft licensing just to see where we could make some cost savings, because, in this day and age, wherever you can save a penny. So we unified a bunch of our business licenses and cut out a bunch of our E-level licensing. And then we added the Teams telephony to it. So yeah, Tyler was who assisted, and he was amazing.
Yeah.
From day one, he was always available.
He is pretty good at that. And it is a bit of a skill. Nothing against Microsoft, but they do know how to make eSKUs and SKUs in general difficult to read through. But once you get the hang of it, our guys can usually offer you some pretty good savings over the stuff that you've been procuring in the past. Glad to hear that happened. How has your users' telephony experience changed after introducing Teams Operator Connect? What do they do today that's different?
It's been an amazing transformation. We got rid of all of our Avaya phones, so we went strictly with Teams for telephony company-wide. We're actually looking at doing that for our call centers as well, Jazz. Glad to see you're having great success with it. So yeah, the experience has been great because, once again, instead of having to guess whether someone was available, you look at your team screen, they're green, they're yellow, they're red. It's in a heartbeat. Instead of sending a quick message, because I'm old school, I'd rather pick up the phone and have a quick conversation than type 25 messages. And I think a lot of our executive team's the same way. So it's been a blessing, to say the least.
Awesome. What was the primary business driver for moving to Teams? Was it a technical driver? Was it a financial mixture of the both? Where did he come from?
It was definitely both. And so financially, it saved us about $16,000 a month, which is significant. You look at that over a 5-year period. As well as technically, I like unifying my vendors as much as possible. We've all been in the situation where you have an issue with something and you have one vendor saying, oh, it's Microsoft, the other vendor saying, oh, no, it's Rogers. By doing it this way, we're unifying our vendors and adding standardization throughout the company.
Excellent. Can you describe the experience of migrating? It's one of those things that comes up a lot with our customers is the fear of the unknown. You're going from something that you've known for a while with the old PBX architectures, PRIs, they've been going on for 40, 50 years. You have it sitting in the corner. It just works. Why are we messing with it? And so how can you describe that migration from the existing telephony legacy stuff into a sort of cloud operator system?
A lot of I'll use our OCC as an example. Some of them had as many as 3 legacy phones on their desk. So getting rid of a bunch of phones, they embraced really quick. The fact that we've had literally no issues with lag, no issues with connectivity, helped our end users embrace the system. There were a couple of hiccups while we were deploying that, but that's be natural. Like we had a couple of call groups that we set up incorrectly. It was more our issue than anyone else's. So we got over that hump really quick. And as soon as we ironed out those few little folds, my end users enjoy the heck out of it.
Excellent. And that the whole cloud interface. So logging into Microsoft's central web tool and being able to see everything in one portal. That's a relatively new experience for anyone who's had sort of distributed PBXs back in the day. You'd be logging into terminals and stuff to configure things. So it's nice to have it in one spot. Have you been able to navigate that well and sort of build your IVR tree and all that jazz?
Oh, for sure. And the nice thing about it is, let's be honest, in the old IVR systems, when you were making changes to call groups or whatever, it was a royal pain. With Teams, it's as easy as dragging and dropping. If you're just moving things around, it's a lot more user friendly.
And can I expand this to Jazz as well? Because a question, Ron and Jazz. So have you delved into Microsoft's reporting yet? They have quite a deep breadth of reporting there, probably more than you'll ever want, but for the amount of calls, who's generating calls, how many minutes being used, that sort of stuff.
I use it most definitely, especially with our OCC. Let's be honest, we have communications between our ground and our pilots, and I want to know when it's happening and how long the calls are taking and if there is any droppage. And so I've used it quite extensively since we've deployed, and I'm ecstatic with it. Like you said, at first there's so much depth to it. It is almost overwhelming until you learn it inside out.
Jazz, has been useful for you?
Yeah, I haven't personally used the reporting. Those requests, we have one of our manager in infrastructure, Luke, he kind of fields those requests. I'm sure that there's been times where those are used, but we use the types of the call recording the call reporting just to understand how citizens are interacting with City Hall, and then we can make different types of decisions. But I haven't personally used it, but I can't imagine, like I've seen the other reporting that's come out of 365 and what Microsoft has to offer, and so I'm sure it's super powerful.
Yeah, it's very fully featured. It's great stuff. Okay. So we were talking about Operator Connect Mobile earlier, Ron. Have you looked at that? Is it something that you could see some of your users leveraging? I mean, obviously you need Rogers phones, but I think you're already a Rogers customer.
Yeah, oh, for sure. And yes, we're definitely investigating that, as well as we're looking at using the Azure IVR features. So we're looking at expanding on this. Our biggest requirements, especially in, again, our OCC department, because of our we have to meet Transport Canada compliances. It's nice for people to be able to have a single phone and utilize one phone instead of carrying 3 like some of them traditionally were. So yeah, we're definitely going to be leveraging that.
I'm curious on, do your pilots have Teams app on their phone? So whenever do they ever go internationally?
Oh yes, yeah, we fly to both Mexico and the US, and we most definitely do. We also have Teams on their so one of our big initiatives is to go paperless. So all of our we have, instead of pilots carrying 150 pages of paper on board, we get iPads through Rogers, and we use these as our electronic flight bags. So we also have Teams installed there, so that if they're sitting downloading flight plans, whatever, they still have communications with our ground crews through Teams.
Nice. It's one of the things we forget about quite quickly is the fact that Teams is so integrated into all the other platforms inside of the Microsoft ecosystem. So, you can get into all the file storage, you build out Teams and collaboration and stuff. I can imagine that being very good for groups of pilots, for airports, that sort of stuff, and keeping files organized. You kind of scratch the surface with Teams with just telephony and chat, but there's quite a lot under the hood, especially when you start adding applications and stuff. It really becomes a sort of central nexus of your communications. So cool stuff.
Well, and that's just it. And let's be honest, we get some of our airports, if we have a plane that's out on the farthest runway, so the northeast runway, for example, down in Mazatlan, it's very spotty internet there. So by using our iPads with a 5G or, let's be honest, their 3G connection, they still have Teams communication, which they didn't have prior. So it's a huge asset.
Very cool. Yeah. Done with the sort of individual questions. I have a few sort of reaction questions from maybe Jazz and Ron. One of the things I noticed in my time working in Rogers with Teams is that as your users start to get used to the interface, your overall PSTN calling minutes starts to go down. So you're making a savings in the fact that you're moving to a cloud telephony system. But even once you've moved, you'll make even more savings as those minutes come down. Whereas with a traditional PBX, people are still calling outside on PSTN all the time. Now you're getting much more teams to teams calling, even to other organizations. So I find that I'm calling people at Microsoft over Teams and other companies, but as Teams becomes more prevalent. Have you started to see teams to teams cross-company calling happening? I mean, it's probably early days, but it could start to happen. I know you can federate with other companies and get that communication going.
We do it all the time. Like in the bottom of my signature, it actually says, call me on Teams or chat with me on Teams, and it's not your traditional phone line. And so that's,
you don't even put your telephone number anymore.
No, and most of my interactions I have, say, with Microsoft or other cities, like for example, Mike Palmer from Victoria is a buddy of mine. When I want to chat with him, we just chat over Teams. We rarely ever call each other, and so it's phenomenal. And so the first thing I do by habit, and I think I'm starting to see this a lot, is people will just grab the email and search for it and see if that person's actually federated to actually chat, and if they are,
really good point.
That's where you go right away, and then you pick up the phone and call later, or set up a meeting with the Teams link in it. And so
did Microsoft tell you about that function, or did you just figure it out? Because I didn't know it, and I read it somewhere, and I'm like, really? And you could just type anybody's email.
That's been out for years, kind of right from the very beginning. It was just, if you,
they should announce it more though in the app. It should have like it in gray or something saying type an email address, because it's very powerful. You can contact anybody globally if they're on Teams by just typing in their email address.
Your organization allows that behavior to happen.
Yeah, a lot turn it off.
And that's the thing. Like, some organizations have shut it down and some have opened it up. And so we've decided to open it up because, like, when we're interacting with, say, Microsoft on a daily basis, it's better to just ping each other via IM and have that chat real quick than to set up a call and wait a week or something like that, because sometimes it's just a quick answer you need. And so that's gone really well for us.
I think Open Federation is the default still, but most larger companies turn it off. But it is, I can see why Microsoft's trying to make it open default, because it's very fun when you first figure it out. You're like, oh, I'll just try this, but oh, they're on Teams, great. And you start to actually, it gets that cross-pollination going, but I can see why some people would turn it off. I'm getting to the end here, and I want to be mindful of time and open it up to the floor for questions. You've got a couple of customers here that have successfully deployed it. I work with a team of solution specialists and architects at Rogers that deploy this day in, day out. If you have any questions about Teams or Teams Phone Mobile or sort of the Microsoft environment, we still have Microsoft here. Feel free to open up your mic and ask the question, or if you prefer, in text.
Hey, Simon, we do have a question from Keith in the chat. So the question is, knowing that there is always a transition period for calling from one IVR to another, is there a seamless solution used to bridge this gap of two IVRs, such as Cisco or Teams platform?
So I'm trying to figure out from IVR to IVR.
Sorry for speaking up, but it was my question. So the question is, like, I have a Cisco phone system, right? So we're using CUCM. I want to make the transition to Teams. I want direct routing. How do I bridge my DID or directory number from one location to another, bridging two different IVRs? Because that's technically what it would be, right?
Yeah, you're basically looking for integration with the Cisco architecture. It's going to be at the SBC level. You're probably going to want to do DR, and you'd need one of our partners to have a chat with you about that. We can home a custom SBC to be able to reach into your environment and be aware of those other DID schemas and be able to integrate properly.
I just want to follow up real quick, Keith. When you meant IVR, you're talking about the full call center call tree, or are you talking about just I have a DID, you have a DID, you're sitting in Cisco, I'm sitting in Teams?
Yeah, it's the full call tree. Think of like a resident calling in, for example. They have my directory number. They've called in through the Cisco IVR, and they need to be transferred to me. Like, you can put in translation patterns. You can put a cube in there that'll do some of that translation pattern. I'm just trying to think of something a little bit simpler as far as the migratory path is concerned, right, Jess? So that's the thought process there.
It's similar to some of our larger customers that have had those integration paths, and it's usually at the SBC level that it's done.
Okay, that's helpful. Yeah, we have 1,700 DIDs, right? So it's like not going to be done overnight, obviously. So I'm trying to figure out what that migration path looks like. Yeah,
you want a natural progression for transfers between the old environment and the new environment while everything's going on. I could if you want to contact me afterwards, I'll put you in contact with a partner that's doing this work for us, and they can just have a chat with you about which will be the best way to do it.
Cheers, appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries.